Grief and change, a natural state that all newcomers go through. Welcome to you, Multicultural channel. I'm Jocelyn Gilbert, and today at the Newcomer Network, we will be talking with Deb Chaboyer. Hi, Deb.
Hi, Jocelyn.
I'm so happy to have you here and talk about grief and change. But before we start to talk about it, I would like you to introduce yourself to our wonderful audience.
So my name is Deb Chaboyer. I've had a multifaceted career, but I've worked in everything from education, adult education, did a lot of work with newcomers, have done a lot of work in the Indigenous world, have worked in social services, therapy. So I kind of come from a more holistic background now when I work with individuals. And I recognized from working with a lot of newcomer students, adult students, they all go through a very similar process, and I was able to relate that back to the grief and change process that people go through when there's any major change or major loss that occurs in their lives.
Yeah, and that's why I found that topic very important for this community, because all of us as newcomers, we experience change and we experience grief, but sometimes we don't know about it. We don't know we are experiencing it.
Yes. And I think that's the biggest thing that happens for people when they choose change, because when we immigrate, that's a choice to change, and a lot of people don't expect there to be sadness in it. They don't expect there to be anger in it. They don't expect there to be frustration in it. They don't expect that they're going to miss some of the things in the way they miss them. And along with that also comes that fear of, where do I begin all the time? And I don't know where I am, and I don't know the rules, I don't know the laws, I don't know the behavior expectations. So you get fear kind of all churning in amongst that. But because people have been led to believe for a very long time that if they choose to make a change, that they should just feel all flowery and wonderful, that there shouldn't be any loss in it. But there is loss.
Yeah, that's true. Because people believe because you were the one who chose to come, you should be happy because you're in Canada already, so why are you complaining?
Yes, that's a common thing, I think, sometimes as receiving countries. We see that attitude sometimes as well from the workplaces we go into, the schools we go into, people wondering like, why we've opened our doors to you, why would you be sad, why would you be frustrated, why would you be angry? And so we'll see things like, some of the things that I really notice, we'll see people will either cluster into very small kind of circles and they don't want to let anyone in when they're in that process, or they'll become very disconnected from everyone, and you'll see them sitting as that lonely person without the friends, without people around them. So we usually see those two different behaviors very commonly when that grief process is happening. And the people that cluster too tightly, they end up, if we think of a group of animals in the wild, if they're too closely clustered, they end up harming one another eventually, because there's no growth that happens, and they get stuck in one of those phases of desperation or anger or frustration or stress. And they kind of feed each other on those negative pieces. The ones that are alone, the same thing happens. They're simply alone and isolated. They have no one, so they feel as though they've left the planet, never mind their country. So it's when people can kind of find a connection between both ways.
A balance.
Yes, everything's about balance when we're grieving, right? And establishing our own rituals and our own practices individually that will help us move through things. So ensuring, and I know it's one of the things you were really good at, you not only celebrate your culture, and you've brought that with you, and you live with it, and you participate in it, but you also have put yourself out in the world amongst all kinds of people. You didn't isolate from others. And I remember one of the things you said in one of the interviews I did with you, where you said, to everyone, talk to other people. It's okay if you don't speak properly. It's okay if you have to ask for the words. Do that. And those kind of things that you've been doing, those are the things that we say build resilience. And that resilience now helps you adapt to all these changes. It helps you be stable in crisis. It helps you be stable in significant sadness, in grief. When we're in grief, if we set up mourning rituals for ourselves for the first, and different people have different timelines, but something as simple as putting up some nice photographs in your home that are of your previous home.
Interesting.
So you have those moments when you look, because if we think about what happens when we lose people in our lives and how we grieve, we usually create some type of memorial in our home for them. And that's part of our process of mourning and part of our way of going through these steps. Well, if we do the same thing when we're doing other types of change, it works the same way.
Yeah.
So it's developing that because we need resiliency to be able to adapt well.
I think that the first thing is understanding that changes bring grief.
Yep.
Most of the time or all the time. What do you think?
It always does, because you're always leaving something.
Yeah. So that's the number one. And the number two, I think it's understanding how you feel or recognizing. Because sometimes people do not recognize that they are feeling upset.
Yes.
And then they are struggling or having challenges to establish good relationship with other people because of that, but they don't understand that they are struggling with those emotions, with those feelings.
Yes.
So, I want to share with you, this week I posted a picture on my social media, and I said, I am sad, I feel sad. And I am posting this because I want people to understand that we all can feel sad. It's not realistic to be happy all the time. But sometimes people struggle identifying or recognizing how they feel.
Yes, they do. And sometimes people feel ashamed of how they feel, so they're unwilling to share it. So when someone like you goes public and shares it, it gives other people permission to feel it. And some people need to almost be given permission externally to feel those feelings. So it's very helpful when people share some of those pieces of themselves.
Yeah. I feel sometimes people don't like to feel vulnerable.
Of course.
And that's why they prefer not to talk about that, even think.
Yes.
About how they feel.
And so the people that don't want to talk about it and don't think about it, as you said, it shows up in other behaviors. So in the workplace or in school, we might see absenteeism, we might see quality of work not at the level they're capable of. We might see poor relationships with coworkers or clients or customers. Or we might see easily frustrated. Or we can see the opposite. We can see someone that's so overachieving that they can't see or feel or hear anything because and we use the term workaholism for that, right? Mm-hmm. So, and the other thing that we see, of course, when people are struggling is the potential for substance abuse. And we see problems in relationships. They'll see it in their relationships. I've spoke to many people, well, this never happened. Now this is happening in my relationship with my husband or my wife, and I don't know who I'm with anymore. Yeah. Because it'll come out sometimes at the more personal level, right? Yeah. So it starts to seep into all these places. And that's that internal battle that's happening in the person because they're denying those feelings.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that because sometimes we see the word, because sometimes we hear the word grief, change, but we don't know how that grief affects our relationships, our school, our work, not only us, but everything around us.
Yes.
Wow, yeah.
Yes, everyone around us is affected. And we know that if people can articulate at least a little bit of that grief, we know that the environments in which they walk, so whether that's family, community, work, those environments, if there are caring people in them, it will actually be very helpful to their mental health and their processing time so that they can actually stabilize in all that they do, even though this horrible stuff is happening inside them. So it's important for employers as well as schools and to understand that this is what's happening with a lot of people. One of the things I used to find surprising but no longer do is newcomers will arrive in the country, and within the first year or two we see heart attacks. We see long-term illnesses. We see lots of miscarriages in the moms. So we see a lot of these different health-related things which we know are affected by stress, and grief is a form of stress.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe culturally they're not that mental health awareness.
Yes.
And I noticed that even the videos that we're talking about mental health or stress, people do not pay that much attention to that. And this is something that we need to create that awareness.
It is. It's really important because I've come across many people in their early year or two here will suddenly, start using alcohol, something they may have never done in their home country. And at first they try to kind of hide it. And then next thing you know, they're coming in and they're beaten up and they're falling asleep in class and not. And people want to then go, hey, this person's just not behaving. But it's like, no, this person's body is telling us with this behavior that they are struggling very badly. And so it's a different type of conversations we need to have. It's a different kind of support they need to have. And that's what happens, I think, if people could understand that going through change, that's what happens is there will be signals that you will give to the world. So trying to suppress it actually harms you more. And it harms the people around you more, and it harms your relationships. Because it's hard, if you've got I look at it from a student perspective right now. If I have a student and they go into an internship and they don't perform very well because their attendance and they were angry, very easy to anger, they were rude with clients or customers, they're not getting that referral that they really needed to move on to the next part of their career. And then that person's coming back in the school 3 to 6 months later, and they're in tears because they haven't found employment and they're worried about being able to stay any longer. And really all it was is a reflection of that grief that they avoided. They avoided to acknowledge. And once they kind of, and like you say, the mental health, not wanting to realize that mental health is a very big thing, and we all have it. There's no such thing as a person that will go through life without having mental health challenges, because life brings things to us that we don't ask for as well. And we just have to get through those things, right? So employers, workplaces, schools, having these conversations, having supports in place for this stuff is really quite important, especially when we have newcomer populations. And with a newcomer population, one of the things I feel we need to develop more in the education system for newcomers and in a lot of the workplaces is a cultural awareness to Canadian society. We're not doing a good job as a welcoming community and country in that cultural awareness. That, helping people understand simple things like, even if you're a parent, what are the expectations for how you discipline your children?
Oh my goodness.
What are the expectations for when children can stay home alone? What are the expectations for children for homework, or for friendships, or for birthday parties, for dating, for using social media? All those things are different. And we don't help people work through those things. So those layers of stress get higher and higher as you hear from newcomer parents, especially with adolescents and teens. Newcomer parents, their stress levels are just beyond almost what they can cope with, because they don't recognize this culture. And they feel that their child is like disappointing them, letting them down, like a foreign alien to them all of a sudden. They start wondering, should we go back home? What did we do wrong? Was it too much? All of those things. And it's because as parents, we didn't help them understand, the normal here, if you want to call the word normal, or the culture here, these are, what you're seeing is all normal expressions of it.
Yeah, and our next episode, we will be talking about that with a specialist. And that's good you mentioned that, because I try my best to bring those topics, but sometimes people are not that interested in that. They would like to hear about other topics.
Yes.
But yeah, totally agree with you. Sometimes we feel, oh, did we make the right choice, to come to Canada? And it's because we don't have that understanding.
Yeah. And I mean, with our young single people that come to Canada, because we get lots of very young people. Some students come in homestay already as before they're adults. But, from 18 and up, there's a lot of young people that come in the 18 to 25 range. And they come from countries that have way different customs and behaviors around dating, around relationships, around those behaviors. And they come here and one of two things seems to happen to them. They either are overwhelmed with the concept and all of a sudden they're wearing, very different clothing than they would have worn at home. And they're very, trying very hard to date many people at the same time. Or you see them just really pull back and confused and scared and trying to figure out what is going on here. And they feel like they're under threat because of this kind of openness, right? So having conversations around birth control, a lot of them have never had those conversations. They don't understand what kind of stuff is out there. They don't understand the right to say no. They don't understand the stop. They don't understand our laws on sexual assault and what constitutes it. So, and I mean, the same happens in couples because some things in some countries are not considered sexual assault that are considered sexual assault here. Yeah. So we have so many different things that are coming at them from the outside. And then, of course, we have leases and rental guidelines and rules and mortgages and all of these things that are different, right? Yeah. I had a student in the past year, she was from Vietnam, and she said when I arrived here, she said it took me 2 months of researching, trying to figure out where should I buy a house because I didn't know what a safe neighborhood looked like here. And then I have other students will arrive and say, I'm living in the basement in this house in this particular neighborhood and like there's crime on the street every day. And in my mind, I'm going, wow. Okay, let's get you out of there. As soon as you said the name of the street, I would know, but they would not know.
Yeah.
So we're just not preparing the way, I think, as much as we need to prepare the way for people coming.
And this is why we are creating this space, and we have lots of information, and we're planning to bring more information for people to have this as a library to get when they're coming or if they are already here, because we as newcomers need to understand about the culture, about how everything works, and to find the right resources. Because what you're saying, it's resources. They don't know where to find those resources.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, we do have some good organizations, as you know, you work with them.
But sometimes they don't know about those organizations.
I know. And sometimes people are resistant to reach to an organization because that might not have been the way they would have done things in their home country.
Oh, yeah, that's totally true. Yeah.
So that's the other thing that I notice. And I said, so it all begins with that person acknowledging that that they made a choice and that there's change that's now triggered. And with that change, there are things that they have lost.
Yeah. And something you mentioned that sometimes organizations are not supporting those people to understand that there's grieving, that they are experiencing this change. But in this case, how can a person deal with that if there's not an organization who's supporting them in that grieving process?
And so that's where it comes down to now building our personal resiliency and our personal practices. So, mindfulness practices. So meditation, we know that that's extremely helpful. One of the reasons meditation is extremely helpful is because it actually rewires your neural pathways. So that's right at the brain structure place that you start to, and that's where everything, of course, functions from initially in our bodies. So if even if a person just takes 10 minutes and sits in their favorite spot and closes their eyes once a day. They don't have to have music. They don't have to go to classes. They can add all those things. But if you can just carve yourself out a small little space somewhere that you just feel good in, that might be your bedroom. You might have a blanket that's your favorite blanket. It might be wrapping up in it. You might go for a walk outside. It doesn't have to cost money, but it's something that you got to try to do daily, every day. Because that will, again, it will build this neural pathway, which will then always trigger, after a few weeks, it will trigger feelings of relief.
Yeah.
So having that type of a practice every day, and it can be as little as 10 minutes, I said, have some type of memorial things that you can see, because we're very visual creatures, or music, because we're audio. So playing music from your home country that you love.
We'll play merengue then.
There you go. See? Yeah, all of those kind of things. Dance, sing. Some people like to draw. If you draw, color, paint, any form of art, collage, take a whole bunch of pictures that you love and cut them out and just glue them to a board together. Yeah. That's art. But all those things, when we do art, we engage the creative side of our brain, which shuts off our logical, analytical, sad brain for a little while. And it also, when we open up our creativity, it opens up the way we think in general. So then we can start to see more than one solution to any problem we have.
Yeah. I want to share with you something. This week, one of our community members texted me. I said, I am also feeling sad, because that's what I posted. My daughter, she moved with her boyfriend, and I am so sad because I had so many plans. I'm thinking she's at 17 or 16 years old, but she just finished university, and I wanted her to do this and that career. And now when she comes to my house, I don't know what to tell her and how to talk about that. But when she said she finished university, I'm just realizing it's an adult. But she's dealing with that grief, that she's not with her child anymore.
Yes.
And yes, it's a kind of grieving when your kids leave home.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, my youngest left home less than 6 months ago, so I am exactly where you are.
and also culturally,
yes,
we are pretending our kids to stay. We're coming from Latino countries, and we're pretending the children to stay there longer. I don't know.
Yes. Well, I
said no, because in Canada this works different, and she's still grieving that.
They're grieving this change that they moved themselves into willingly, and you're grieving as their parent this change that you were unwillingly pulled into. And so when you meet together, there sometimes can be fireworks when instead we want there to just be love. Mm-hmm. Because both people are dealing with two sides of the grief, one voluntary, one involuntary. And that can become very dynamic sometimes. So it's you have to learn how to re-navigate, they have to learn how to re-navigate, and you're starting to start a whole new relationship with them. And it's not easy. For a parent, it's the end of something. Yeah. It's the end of my baby girl. Yes. And we're never ready for that moment, just so you know.
How can I deal with that?
Right?
I tell my kids, you get married when you're 50. But just kidding.
Journaling, a lot of people find journaling helpful. So sitting down and writing their feelings before they go to sleep. Some people like to just draw a picture with their feelings. Some people don't like to write, but they'll draw a picture with their feelings. So again, adding some type of a daily practice that acknowledges this sadness. It's okay to spend your day, and at the end of the day, just take 2 or 3 minutes, open up a book and say whatever your daughter's name is. I really miss you. I am really sorry that we are moving into this new phase of life. And my apologies that I am struggling, but this is hard for me. And that's all you need to say.
I'm going to share that video with that person.
Because that will allow you to acknowledge those feelings every day so that you're not carrying them into your work the same way, right? And then the people around you sharing that, like you said, I'm sad. The people around you, that triggers the people in your world to say, hey, I need some extra support today.
Yeah. Right? And you know what? We need to be ready for that, because change, it's always there.
Yes, and it can happen in an instant, and it can be unexpected, and it can be tragic. And even wonderful things can happen in a split second, and they're exciting, and you jump and you move, and then all of a sudden you're like, 3 months later, why am I not happy? This was so exciting when I started it.
Yeah. Even change when you're moving from one stage to another in your life. For example, I'm in the 40s now. Yes. And there are some things that I used to enjoy, and I was great doing that, but I can't anymore. And it's not that, it's not the stage anymore.
I know. And then you get to my stage.
Exactly. And then I will be 50 and then 60 and things will change.
Yes.
We need to be ready for change.
Yes, we do. And we need, and as parents, and lots of times as women, but I see men do it too, we take on the responsibility at some point. We're trying to prepare others for the changes that are coming because we are aging. Like I find myself having different conversations with one or two of my adult children now than I used to have, because I want them to know I never want to leave them, but I also don't know when my time to leave is going to be.
Wow.
Right? And my children have only me as a parent, and they don't have any grandparents or aunts or uncles. So it's going to be significant for the ones that are close to me, right?
Yeah.
And so I find myself sometimes what they feel overstepping because I'm trying to prepare them for, and it's like, no, and they don't want to talk about it, right?
Yeah, it's like you're trying to ignore that.
Yes. I would like to ignore it, but yes, I would like to ignore it, but I don't, because I think that my love for my children overrides that in this case. So I want them just to be, I just want them to know to just go on and be happy and be joyful and to enjoy their lives and to not sit in the loss. Because I see too many people in life just sit in the loss day after day. I'd like to just share one more story. I work with someone who lost a child recently, and they've been very proactive in trying to do everything they can, and of course very, very sad. And it was tragic, it was sudden. And as the anniversary dates come up, a lot of people get it triggers internally.
Yeah.
Just as moving to Canada, I imagine most of you celebrate every year that it's a new year, right? So this year, he'd had a very, very heavy weighted year. Through help and assistance from other people and whatnot, and various things he was doing in his self-care, he came up with the idea of fireworks. So he went out and he spent a few $100s, took his family, invited other people, and on the anniversary this year, they shot off fireworks. They had to get a permit. They shot off fireworks and talked about it. And you know the change I have seen in him? Since then, there's like a lifting of one of those layers of the deep darkness is lifted, because he chose to celebrate his child now instead of just sitting in the really dark phase. And it's just lovely the way that's changed him. So I thought that's something that I definitely think that people should try, is things like that, just that celebration part, looking at that on the anniversaries. So preparing for those sad days in advance. And, of course, surrounding yourself with those that you need.
Wow, Deb, you gave us a huge list of things to do. We are going to write all those things in the bottom, in the caption of this video. Deb, how can people find you, and what kind of services can you provide to people experiencing change and grief?
So I can be found on LinkedIn right now. I'll be launching a new website in the next 3 or 4 weeks, and I'll announce all that on LinkedIn. So that's my primary. I have a small account started on Instagram, which I will start to use a lot more. As I'm launching my private practice, I'm being accredited right now. I've completed my training to be a hypnotherapist. I was drawn to hypnotherapy because as a counselor across many different realms in prior experiences, one of the things I really noticed is that a lot of people get very frustrated. They really don't have 6, 12, 18 months to feel relief, and a lot of them get frustrated. And hypnotherapy is a type of therapy specifically where a person is involved in deep relaxation, so that we can kind of connect and contact the subconscious or the unconscious. Some people will call it one, some of the other. And that's where all our limiting beliefs are living. That's where all of our fears that the fears that we have, that's where all the memories are held from those first moments that they occurred. And so like any other first moment, it's the building block of those neural pathways. And so if a tragedy occurred to us when we were 3 or 4 years old, we might not remember.
Yeah.
But what we will remember is how people managed their grief, perhaps, or how alone we felt. And so then if a tragedy happens now, we go subconsciously or unconsciously, that gets triggered in our brain because it's all part of those neural pathways now. And so we respond very much the same way over and over again because we're responding from that younger self. And nobody has a perfectly beautiful, wonderful line in life, right? We all have struggles and tragedies and all that stuff. So that's what hypnotherapy does. It helps us get there quicker. So for most people, it'll be anywhere from 2 to 5 sessions versus going, 20 or 30 sessions. It's much quicker. Wow. It's much easier. And individuals maintain control. They're not like unconscious. They can hear everything, they know what they're choosing to do it. So so that's what I'm doing. I'm going to be adding that I've added that to my toolbox because I want to work more with people one-to-one, and you can deliver hypnotherapy in groups as well, more one-to-one to help them resolve some of those deeper things quicker so they can get lighter sooner, if that makes sense. Because when we get lighter, even if we can just lift one layer of darkness off a person, just as I saw with my colleague there, with that one layer lifted, now more of his resilience is freed to him. And now he's coming up with much more new ways. He's like taking care of his health, he's running, he's all kinds of things. Because it was just getting that heaviest layer off there. And instead of taking a whole year or two to do that, this is just a quicker way.
And thank you so much for sharing your wonderful experience and your tips to support and deal with grief and change in all aspects of our lives. We talk about everything, I think. Yeah. And thank you to our wonderful audience for being there once again at the Newcomer Network, You Multicultural Channel, and Jocelyn Gilbert. See you next time. Bye-bye.